Think about your morning for a sec. Did you actually decide which shoe to put on first, or which side of your mouth to start brushing? Probably not, right? Chances are you just did it. Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible architecture of your daily life, your habits. These are the silent engines that guide pretty much everything you do and who you are most of the time, without you even noticing. So just how much of our life is running on autopilot? Well, this number right here, 40%. That's from a Duke University study. And what it means is pretty staggering. More than 40% of the things you do every single day aren't actually conscious decisions. Nope, they're habits. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. What if nearly half of everything you do today wasn't really a choice? If that's true, then figuring out how these automatic routines work isn't just some fun piece of trivia. It's absolutely crucial if you want to actually be in the driver's seat of your own life. Okay, to really get a grip on just how deep these habits run, we've got to look at a pretty extreme case. We're going to talk about a man whose condition was a complete mystery to scientists and ended up rewriting everything we thought we knew about memory and learning and how our brains work. So let me introduce you to Eugene Pauly. A viral infection came in and just wiped out the core of his memory. The part of his brain responsible for storing new experiences, it was just gone. I mean, he couldn't tell you what he just had for breakfast. He couldn't even recall his own son's name. And this is where the puzzle begins. On one hand, you have a man who's completely lost in time. He couldn't tell you how old he was. He couldn't even draw you a basic map of the house he lived in. But, and this is the wild part, he could get up and find the bathroom in that same house, no problem. And even more amazing, he started taking these daily walks all by himself, and somehow he always found his way back home. So, you see the problem, right? This was the huge question that had researchers scratching their heads. How can a person form a new routine if they can't remember the last 30 seconds? How do you learn to take a daily walk if you have zero memory of taking one yesterday? Well, the answer, it turns out, is buried deep inside the brain. Yeah, Eugene's case basically forced scientists to look somewhere else, beyond our conscious memory. They started hunting for a more primitive, more automatic part of our mind. They were on the trail of the brain's autopilot system. And what they found was this thing called the basal ganglia. Now, just picture like a golf ball-sized chunk of ancient hardware buried deep inside your brain. Its whole job is to save you mental effort. It takes all these common routines, like tying your shoes or backing the car out of the driveway, and it converts them into automatic behaviors so you don't have to think about them. This right here is the habit center. So to actually see this thing in action, some scientists at MIT set up a really clever experiment. They took some rats and put them in a simple T-shaped maze. Here's the setup. A loud click sounds, a little door opens, and if the rat can find its way to the end of the maze, it gets a little piece of chocolate. Simple enough, right? Now check out what happened inside the rats' brains. That first bar shows the first run. Their brains were firing on all cylinders, just working like crazy to figure this maze out. But look at the second bar. After just 1 week, once running the maze became a habit, their overall mental activity just plummeted. It's like their brains went, you know what, I don't need to think about this anymore, and offloaded the whole job to the basal ganglia. It basically went into low power mode. But here's the really interesting part. The brain wasn't totally asleep. The scans showed 2 sharp spikes of activity. The first one happened right at the beginning when the rat heard that click. That's the cue. The second spike came at the very end when it got the chocolate. That's the reward. And everything in between? Total autopilot. This simple pattern, cue, autopilot, reward, turned out to be the key to understanding every single habit. So this discovery from the rat maze, it led to one of the biggest aha moments in the science of habits. It gave us a beautifully simple 3-part framework that explains exactly how our brains build and run these automatic behaviors. And here it is. It's called the habit loop. Super simple, just 3 steps. First, you've got the cue. That's the trigger that tells your brain, hey, go into automatic mode now. Next up is the routine. This is the actual behavior, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. And finally, you get the reward. This is the little prize at the end that tells your brain, hey, that was good, let's remember this loop for next time. Cue, routine, reward. That's it. That's the basic engine of every single habit. So let's go back to Eugene. With this loop in mind, his mysterious walks suddenly make perfect sense. See, he didn't need his memory to know where his house was. All he needed was a consistent cue, maybe a certain tree on a corner, that would trigger the automatic routine of walking that specific path. And what was the reward? this simple, satisfying feeling of arriving safely at his own front door. The loop just ran itself. And what's so fascinating is that this isn't just something scientists found in a lab. Decades before any of this, an advertising pioneer named Claude Hopkins had basically figured this whole thing out just by intuition. This guy became an absolute master at finding a simple cue and defining a really clear reward to sell pretty much everything. But is that the whole story? I mean, the success Hopkins had and the way our own stubborn habits stick around, it kind of suggests there's something more going on. We know the parts of the loop, cue, routine, reward, but what's the actual power source? What's the invisible force that makes the whole thing go round and round? Well, it turns out the answer is this incredibly powerful neurological force, one that doesn't just allow the loop to happen, but actively drives it forward. That force is craving. Let's jump back to Claude Hopkins and his most famous campaign, Pepsodent. Now, believe it or not, back in the early 1900s, only about 7% of Americans brushed their teeth. It just wasn't a thing. So Hopkins finds a brilliant cue, that natural tooth film that everyone has. He made people aware of it, then he offered this amazing reward, a beautiful, bright Pepsodent smile. And the results? They were just off the charts. Within a decade, over 65% of the population was brushing daily. He literally created a national habit. But here's the real secret. It wasn't just about the film or the smile. See, Pepsodent had these ingredients, like citric acid and mint oil, that created this cool, tingling sensation in your mouth. Now, this tingle didn't actually do anything to make your teeth cleaner, but people started to associate it with being clean. They started to miss that feeling if they skipped a day. They began to crave the tingle. And that craving, that was the real engine of the habit.
And this isn't just some old-timey advertising trick. It's backed up by hard science. There was this neuroscientist, Wolfram Schultz, who did an experiment with a monkey named Julio. The setup was simple. Julio sees a shape on a screen, the cue, he presses a lever, the routine, and he gets a drop of juice, the reward. Now, at first, Julio's brain showed a pleasure spike when he got the juice. Makes sense. But as this became a habit, something incredible happened. The pleasure spike moved. It started happening the moment he saw the cue. His brain wasn't just happy about getting the reward. It was experiencing pleasure in anticipation of the reward. And that feeling of anticipation, yep, that's craving.
All right, so let's put all the pieces together. We've got Eugene and his walks, we've got the rats in the maze, the story of Pepsodent, and Julio the monkey. When you line them all up, you get the complete, crystal clear picture of how a habit is actually forged in our brains. So here it is, the single most important insight from all of this. The cue doesn't just trigger the routine. That's not the whole story. The cue triggers a craving for the reward. And it's that intense feeling of craving that actually drives the routine and fuels the entire loop. So this gives us the updated and much more powerful habit loop. It starts with the cue. That's the trigger. But that cue immediately ignites a craving, which is the real engine here. That craving drives you to perform the routine, the action itself. And finally, you get the reward, the prize that satisfies the craving and tells your brain, let's do that again. Cue, craving, routine, reward. This 4-stage process is running in the background of your mind maybe hundreds of times every single day. You know, understanding this loop, it's like finally getting the user manual for your own brain. It gives you the power to look at the habits in your own life, the ones you love and the ones you hate, and actually understand how they work. And once you understand them, you can start to change them. So now that you know the loop that's driving you, the only real question is, which habit will you choose to change first?